Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a fascinating topic, the whole world of usable privacy on your phone.
That's right. We've got a stack of research comparing three really different approaches. Stock Android, Graphene OS, and the one we're focusing on today, CalyxOS.
And it all seems to start with this really fundamental conflict, a philosophical clash almost.
It really is. On one side, you have Graphene OS, which is purely security first.
And what does that mean in practice?
Well, our sources put it perfectly. It treats the user like a high-value target under siege.
Under siege. So if a feature like, say, Android Auto creates even a tiny potential risk.
It's gone. They just remove it. Anything that expands the attack surface is out, period.
But that's where CalyxOS comes in with a completely different take. They call it privacy for everyone.
And that's their core thesis, isn't it? That if you make an operating system too hard to use, people just won't.
Exactly. They'll just go back to a normal iPhone or a regular Android phone, and then all that security work is for nothing.
So the most effective privacy tool is the one you'll actually stick with day to day.
Which means CalyxOS isn't some bare-bones, stripped-down system. It's what the sources call batteries included.
Yeah, it comes with apps you'd want anyway, like Signal, Tor browser, the F-Droid App Store. It's all pre-installed.
And it keeps convenience features, right? Like Snart Lock.
That's a big one. Using your location or a Bluetooth watch to keep your phone unlocked, Graphene OS would never allow that.
Okay, so that raises a huge question, a fascinating one. If you want app notifications and features like Smart Lock to work, how do you do that without just letting Google run the show?
And that is the absolute key architectural difference between them. It's how they handle Google services.
Graphene OS is super strict. It lets you install the real Google Play services, but locks them down in a sandbox.
A very heavy sandbox. But CalyxOS does something totally different. You could say it's truly de-Googled.
How so?
They replace Google's apps and services entirely with something called microG.
microG. What on earth is that?
It's basically an open source project written by the community to pretend to be Google.
Do pretend.
Yeah, it mimics the APIs that apps need to call for, things like push notifications or getting your location. It's an imitation, which means you're not running any of Google's proprietary code.
That's a brilliant solution for usability. But now we have to talk trade-offs. What are you giving up on a technical level for that convenience?
Well, there are a couple of big ones. First is system hardening.
Okay.
Graphene OS uses a really advanced technique called hardened malloc. It makes memory corruption bugs way less exploitable. CalyxOS just uses the standard Android system, which is called Scudo. It's good, but it's not on the same level.
And the second trade-off.
Update speed. This one is critical.
I'd imagine. Our sources say Graphene OS gets security patches out in, a few hours?
Almost instantly. Hours after the Android open source project, or AOSP, releases a fix. CalyxOS is slower.
How much slower?
Sometimes days, potentially even weeks. They accept that longer window of vulnerability because they want to test everything and make sure the update doesn't break things. It's all about that usability thesis.
So to bring this all together for you, there's this great analogy in the research. It says CalyxOS is the Linux Mint to Graphene OS's Arch Linux.
That's perfect. Arch Linux is for tinkerers who want absolute control. Mint is for people who just want it to work out of the box.
Like a journalist who needs their push notifications to work reliably, or a parent who just doesn't have time to mess with configurations.
Exactly. Calyx prioritizes that smooth user experience, and it does that by replacing proprietary Google code with this clever open source mimic, microG.
And that brings us to our final thought. Our source material calls microG the most controversial and important part of CalyxOS.
It really is. And it leaves you with this fascinating question to think about. If an entire operating system's usability and privacy success hinges on its ability to successfully trick other apps into thinking a proprietary giant is present, can long-term security really be achieved through imitation? So today, we are diving into a central problem in the private OS world. It's a big one.
It really is.
How do you get modern Android apps, the ones you actually rely on, like Uber or Signal, to work without Google's code?
Right. Apps that are completely dependent on Google Play services.
Exactly. And our source material today points to this really radical solution from CalyxOS called microG.
microG is, well, it's a fascinating piece of software. It's a free and open source re-implementation, basically a mock version of Google's own libraries.
A mock, so it's like a stand-in.
Precisely. The goal is just to let an app call a Google API, get a valid response, and keep working, all while making sure your phone never actually talks to Google servers.
Okay, but that sets up an immediate problem. If this thing is just an impersonator, how does it handle something as basic as, say, finding your location?
And that's where one of its key components, Unified NLP, comes into play.
Unified Network Location Provider.
Exactly. It completely replaces Google's own location tracking, which scans Wi-Fi networks around you. Instead, you get to choose your own backend.
Like what?
You could use the Mozilla Location Service or even Apple's Wi-Fi database. So your location request goes to them, not Google. It's a huge privacy win.
But for this whole impersonation to work, there's a really controversial security compromise involved, right? The system basically has to lie.
That is the core of the debate, yes. Android security is built on one simple rule.
Yeah.
No app can pretend to be another app.
And microG has to do exactly that.
It has to. It needs to claim the package name com.google.android.gms. The system has to be patched to allow this, and a technical term for it is signature spoofing.
Signature spoofing. That just sounds risky. If the OS is built to allow lying, what stops malware from impersonating a bank app or something critical?
It's a very valid concern. But this is where CalyxOS makes a calculated trade-off. They restrict this signature spoofing power only to the pre-installed microG system app.
So a random app I download from F-Droid can't just get this power.
No, absolutely not. It's hard-coded. They're accepting this one, very controlled risk to avoid what they see as the much greater risk of running Google's closed source code.
Okay, so we go from that technical compromise to a much more practical one, the one the user faces right at setup. Enable cloud messaging.
Yes, and this is a fundamental choice between convenience and privacy.
What happens if I say yes?
If you say yes, microG connects to Google's servers, but anonymously. It strips your device ID and just uses a generic token to grab push notifications for apps like Slack or Discord.
And that's how you get instant alerts with low battery use.
That's the key. Low battery use.
But if I say no, if I want maximum privacy,
then microG stays completely offline. And you feel it. Apps have to fall back on their own methods, like WebSockets, which can drain your battery.
or you just don't get the notification at all.
More often than not, yes.
Yeah.
You won't know you have a message until you actually open the app. It's a very real, tangible trade-off.
So when we zoom out, it seems like the best way to think of microG is as a compatibility shim, just a translation layer.
That's the perfect term for it.
Yeah.
And it's what really shows the different strategies in this space. You look at something like GrapheneOS. They take the opposite approach. They sandbox the real Google binaries. They lock them down tight. microG doesn't do that. It builds an open source imitation that requires that OS level patch we talked about.
So microG is arguably more private by default because it's FOSS, but maybe less secure than Graphene's sandboxing approach.
That's a fair summary. It's a different set of priorities.
So after this deep dive, you can see that compatibility in this world often requires this deliberate act of deception, this impersonation. And it forces you, the user, into a choice between privacy and modern convenience. Which brings us to the final thought for you to chew on. Given that usable privacy always seems to have a cost, be it battery life, delayed alerts, or system complexity, where do you personally draw the line?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping right into a really core philosophical tension in the world of private, secure operating systems.
And that is the hardware problem.
Exactly. The fact that the most secure options pretty much force you to buy a Google Pixel, from the very company you're trying to avoid.
It's a real contradiction, and that's where we're focusing this deep dive on CalyxOS, because they take a very different path.
They're trying to be a bridge, right, between that idea of perfect security and the messy reality of real-world constraints.
Precisely. They accept certain trade-offs to meet ethical and economic needs that others weren't.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Yeah.
This philosophy of hardware diversity. We should probably start with the gold standard
Yeah.
of their ethical approach, which is supporting the Fairphone.
Right. And the synergy there is just fascinating. You get this ethical OS running on what is, designed to be ethical hardware.
A phone built so you can actually repair it.
Yeah, you can swap the battery or the screen with just a simple screwdriver. And it's built on, supposedly, better labor practices.
But here's the trade-off. How does CalyxOS justify supporting a device when its hardware security is, let's be honest, just not as strong as a Pixel's?
That is the trade-off. See, the Fairphone's implementation of something called verified boot, it just historically wasn't as robust as the security you get from the Pixel's dedicated Titan chip.
That physical root of trust.
Exactly. So by supporting the Fairphone, CalyxOS is making a statement. They're saying ethics and repairability can, in some cases, come before maximum hardware security.
And this choice isn't just about ethics. It's an economic one, too, which is why they support cheap Motorola phones.
Yes, because pixels are expensive. Privacy shouldn't be a luxury good. If you can get these tools on a, $150 phone that you can buy anywhere in the world?
That changes everything. It opens the door for so many more people.
It absolutely does.
So this thinking, it completely changes how they handle a device's end of life, or EOL.
It really does. I mean, you look at Graphene OS, their stance is incredibly strict. The moment Google stops updating a pixel, they drop it. Period. It's seen as fundamentally insecure.
No exception.
None. But CalyxOS, again, they're looking at it through that ethical and economic lens. They often support devices past their official EOL date.
And the main driver there is fighting e-waste, right?
Yep, that's the core of it. Their logic is that it's a much bigger risk for someone to be running an old, vulnerable version of stock Android than it is to run an updated CalyxOS on that same old hardware.
Keeps a perfectly good phone out of a landfill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you have to understand the risk. The OS itself is secure, sure, but the underlying hardware drivers for your Bluetooth, your Wi-Fi,
Those are frozen in time.
they are forever vulnerable. The manufacturer isn't updating them anymore. So users on those older devices are consciously accepting that firmware risk to keep the phone alive.
So let's boil this all down for you.
Yeah.
The central tension here is that CalyxOS is deliberately choosing accessibility over the absolute security that its peers demand.
Right. So your first key takeaway is this. You have to decide what matters more to you. Is it that hardware diversity for ethical and economic reasons? Or is it the ironclad security you get from one specific type of premium hardware?
And the second takeaway.
The second is that you're making a conscious risk calculation. If you choose to extend a device's life to fight e-waste, you are accepting a very real, if small, vulnerability in that old firmware.
Which leaves us with a final thought. At what point does the quest for perfect security become, economically or ethically exclusive?
It's a serious question. If uncompromised security means only the latest, most expensive devices from a tech giant are viable,
Does that defeat the whole purpose of spreading privacy to everyone? So you have to ask yourself, what's the right balance between maximum security and maximum accessibility?
welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something really critical for anyone stepping outside the usual mobile ecosystem. If you're running a custom OS, say CalyxOS on a Fairphone or a Motorola, you've made a choice. But what's the single biggest security hurdle you have to clear?
It really boils down to trust, specifically something called Android Verified Boot, or AVB.
AVB, great.
Yeah, and this is the system that makes sure your software hasn't been tampered with before it even loads. The historical problem is that when people flash a custom OS, they're told to just leave the bootloader unlocked.
Forever.
Forever. And that unlocked state is a huge physical security gap. It makes you vulnerable to what we call an evil maid attack.
Where someone with brief physical access to your phone could just inject malware.
Exactly. It's a major risk.
So that's the paradox, isn't it? You go for better privacy software, but then you have to accept this glaring physical vulnerability.
It was, yeah.
So our mission today is to unpack the mechanism. How does CalyxOS actually manage to implement AVB using its own custom keys on devices that weren't built to trust them? How do they close that door?
Well, what's so fascinating is understanding the manufacturer bottleneck.
Okay.
Phone, when it leaves the factory, its bootloader is basically hardwired. It trusts one key and one key only. The manufacturers. Motorola's, Samsung's, whoever.
Right. So if you flash CalyxOS and then try to relock the bootloader,
It fails. The phone sees the Calyx key signature and says, nope, don't recognize you. And it just won't boot. The digital ID doesn't match.
So if the phone only trusts that original signature, how do they get around that check without, breaking security wide open?
They leverage a feature called user set roots of trust.
User set roots of trust.
Yeah, it's a brilliant feature in a lot of modern devices, actually, including the Fairphone 4 and 5 and some specific Motorola models. These phones let the user replace the factory key with a new one.
Ah, so this is where the physical installation process becomes that critical handshake.
Precisely. During the install, the Calyx Flasher utility literally pushes the Calyx public key right onto the phone's security chip.
Okay.
Once that key's in there, you relock the bootloader. Now the device says, okay, my factory trust is overwritten. From now on, I only trust software signed by this new Calyx key.
And it enforces that chain of trust right from power on.
It does.
And the proof that this all worked is, well, it's visual, which is incredibly satisfying. You boot up and you see that yellow warning screen, the one that says your device has loaded a different operating system.
That yellow state is your absolute sign of success. That's what you want to see.
So yellow is good.
Yellow is good. It proves verified boot is active, the bootloader is locked, and it's using the custom key you just installed. But crucially, that screen shows a 32-character ID hash.
And you, the listener, need to check that number.
You absolutely should. Check that ID against the published hash on the CalyxOS website. If they match, you know the integrity of your device is fully confirmed.
So if yellow means you're secure and happy, what's the danger zone? What do people need to look out for?
The red state. If you see that screen turn red, that signals an unlocked and unverified device. It means the key enrollment failed, the chain of trust is broken, and the device can't guarantee its software is safe. Red means stop.
Right. Red is a serious problem.
Yellow means go.
This whole strategy, it really puts CalyxOS in a different category, doesn't it? I mean, I see so many other custom ROMs where the instructions just say, keep your bootloader unlocked.
They do, because they don't automate the key enrollment or sign every build consistently. CalyxOS's insistence on only supporting hardware that allows relocking, well, it elevates it from a hobbyist ROM to a proper security product. It's a necessary distinction when you're thinking about real-world threats like physical tampering.
So what does this all mean for you, listening at home? The main takeaway is that moving to a custom OS doesn't have to mean giving up physical security. By using these user-set roots of trust, CalyxOS successfully extends that hardware-level security to non-Pixel phones. It protects you, even if someone gets their hands on your device.
And if we sort of connect this to the bigger picture, it raises a really important question. Now that we see user enrollment securing mobile phones, what other areas of tech, I'm thinking routers, smart home devices, could be drastically hardened against physical access if only they allowed a user-enrolled root of trust? Something for you to mull over.
Okay, let's get into it. So you've successfully installed CalyxOS, the setup wizard is done, and now you're facing that unique challenge, right? How do you get your apps in a world without Google Play?
Exactly.
And that's really what this deep dive is all about, navigating those choices and understanding the big architectural trade-off CalyxOS makes to keep things easy.
Yeah, that's our mission here. We want to give you the shortcut to understanding the two main ways to get apps, F-Droid and Aurora Store, and how the system is it's built to feel familiar.
Right, even though it's super privacy focused.
Exactly. It all comes down to this tension between, say, convenience and total control.
So before we dive into the app stores themselves, let's just quickly touch on the foundation you already set up in that initial wizard. You made, what, 3 big choices there?
Yeah, 3 really vital ones. So first up was that microG toggle. It's on by default, and that's the magic piece that lets apps get Google push notifications without a real Google account.
Okay, so that's crucial. And the second one was location.
Location services, yeah. You basically chose between the Mozilla service, which is more accurate because it uses network data, or Deacon.
And Deacon is the completely offline one.
Totally offline. Your data never leaves the phone. It's a huge privacy win.
Absolutely.
And third was that batteries included, screen, letting you grab stuff like Signal and Tor browser right from the start.
So you have a working phone from minute one. Okay, so the system's running. But the app experience. Let's start with F-Droid. That feels like the purist's choice.
It is. F-Droid's whole philosophy is free and open source software, FOSS. You're not going to find any proprietary apps, no tracking libraries, none of that.
And it's secure because they're actually building the apps themselves.
In many cases, yeah. They build them from the source code, which is, a guarantee that what you're downloading is exactly what the developer wrote.
But the real game changer on CalyxOS isn't just that F-Droid is there, it's how it's there. It's not just another app you have to open and check all the time.
No. And this is the key insight. CalyxOS gives F-Droid something called a privileged extension.
Okay, what does that do?
It basically gives F-Droid permission to install and, more importantly, update apps automatically in the background. You don't have to approve anything. It just works, like Google Play.
Which is great for open source stuff, but, we live in the real world. What about when you absolutely need your banking app or Spotify or Instagram?
And that necessity is exactly why you have the Aurora Store. Think of Aurora as the essential bridge to the proprietary world.
So it's a client for the Google Play Store.
It is, yeah. An anonymous client. It logs in with a disposable sort of dummy Google account. So you can download all those normal apps, but your own Google account is nowhere near the phone.
And because you've got microG running, most of those apps just work as expected.
Generally, yeah. They can get notifications, they can use location, it works. The only real risk is that Google technically doesn't like this.
So what happens?
They might just, rate limit or block that one dummy account that Aurora is using. It doesn't affect your device at all. You just wait, and Aurora will switch to a new one.
It's a risk CalyxOS thinks is worth it.
For the sake of app access, yes.
Okay, so this all comes back to that architectural thing we mentioned, the privileged extensions. CalyxOS gives this power to both F-Droid and Aurora. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, it really gets to the heart of different trust models. CalyxOS is making a deliberate choice here. They're prioritizing a low-friction, auto-updating experience that feels familiar.
Like a normal phone.
Exactly. But if you compare that to a stricter system, like, say, Graphene OS, they would see giving an app store that much system power as a potential vulnerability.
So on those systems, you'd have to manually approve every single update for every app.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
You sacrifice that convenience for, much more granular control. It's a trade-off.
So CalyxOS is basically choosing usability. They're making a secure OS approachable by trading a tiny bit of security rigor for that convenience.
That's a perfect way to put it. That auto-update mechanism is how they make a secure OS feel, well, normal.
All right, let's just quickly summarize the key takeaways for you.
Sure. So there are three main things to remember. First, F-Droid. That's your trusted integrated source for all things open source. Second, Aurora Store. That's your anonymous front door to the Google Play library.
And third,
the engine behind it all. Privileged extensions. That's the mechanism that makes the seamless, friction-free auto updates possible for both.
which brings us to our final thought for you to chew on. How much power should an app repository really have? Is the convenience of never having to manually approve an update worth giving that app store such elevated privilege on your system? Something to think about.
All right, let's jump straight in. We got a lot of requests to do a deep dive on network sovereignty, and specifically on that CalyxOS system app, Datura.
Right, and the goal here is to really unpack how it flips the whole script.
What's the script how?
Well, the default for phones is apps get data. That's the assumption. Datura changes it to apps get data only if I say so.
So it's like a control panel.
Exactly. It's the cockpit for your phone's radio, and the controls are right there, front and center, not buried in some menu you can't find.
I think everyone knows that frustration.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with the granularity. It's not just a simple on or off toggle, is it?
No, not at all. That's the first thing you notice. It gives you separate controls for every app over 3 different interfaces.
3.
Yep. Wi-Fi, mobile data, and your VPN. Each one gets its own toggle. That's the key thing that stock Android just doesn't really do. It tends to bundle them.
And that separation lets you do some really interesting things. Like, say you have a data-hungry app you don't trust.
Mm-hmm.
You can just kill its access to mobile data completely.
Right. But it can still work perfectly fine when you're at home on your Wi-Fi. It's surgical.
Okay, that leads right into the next level, this idea of a stealth mode. You're talking about the background data restriction here.
I am. There's a toggle for background data, and it's pretty powerful. The second your screen goes off or you minimize an app, it's cut off.
Cut off from the internet completely.
Completely, the connection is severed.
So wait, doesn't standard Android claim to do something similar? It has a background data setting. How is this actually different?
That's a great question. Stock Android often just, throttles it or makes suggestions to the app. It's a soft restriction. Datura, on the other hand, it's like pulling the circuit breaker.
So it's a hard no.
It's a hard no. The app literally can't phone home. It can't fetch ads. It can't track your location in the background. It's confined.
Speaking of control, let's talk about leaks. That's always the biggest risk when you're using a VPN.
It's the #1 risk. Your VPN will drop. It's just a matter of when. Maybe you walk between Wi-Fi and cellular. Maybe the server is unstable.
And when it drops, your real IP is exposed.
Your traffic just spills out onto the regular, unprotected network.
So this is where the VPN pass-through feature comes in. It's a leak protection mechanism.
It is. It's the ultimate fail-safe. You can set a rule for an app that says it can only access the internet if it's going through the VPN.
So if the VPN connection stumbles for even a second,
Datura sees the traffic isn't encapsulated anymore and just blocks the app cold. Nothing gets out. Your data never hits the open network.
that's powerful. Okay, let's get to the most advanced piece of this. Blocking unencrypted Clear text traffic. We always hear about coffee shop hackers.
And that threat is absolutely real. If an app is lazy and sends data over plain HTTP, anyone on that coffee shop Wi-Fi can just read it. It's like sending a postcard.
So Datura can actually stop that.
Yes, you can set it either for one app or for the whole phone to block any traffic that isn't using modern, secure TLS, HTTPS.
So the defense is just, if an app tries to send an unencrypted packet, Datura sees it and just drops it.
Drops it on the floor, it never leaves your device, it forces a minimum standard of security.
So to wrap this up for you, the listener, Datura is really about inverting control. You get those separate toggles for Wi-Fi, mobile data, and VPN. You get true background restriction, and you get that critical leak protection.
It's a totally different philosophy. You are fundamentally in charge of your device's sovereignty.
And that reversal of the default is the key takeaway. So here's a final thought to chew on. If you can have this kind of deep, granular control over your network radio, app by app, what other parts of your phone, like the microphone or the camera, should operating systems be forced to give you that same level of control over? Something to think about.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into this idea of network sovereignty.
Right, and we're doing that by looking at the integrated VPNs inside CalyxOS.
Exactly, Calyx VPN and RiseUp. And the question we're really asking is, can network security be free, effortless, and actually trustworthy?
Well, before we get too deep, I think we need to set the table with a really key technical point from the source material.
Okay.
A firewall that controls which of your apps can even talk to the internet.
Right, so it can block an app completely.
Exactly. But a VPN, that's different. It controls where those apps appear to be connecting from. It's about location, not permission.
That's a crucial distinction. Got it. So our mission here is to unpack how CalyxOS treats this kind of encryption, not as some add-on, but as, well, a basic utility that's just there from the start. Okay, so let's start with Calyx VPN itself. The Calyx Institute is an ISP, which is interesting on its own, and they offer this service for free, unlimited, and you don't even need an account. So my first thought is, if they're a nonprofit, how is that sustainable? What's the catch?
Well, the thing is, that nonprofit model is the feature. You're not trusting a corporation that needs to make a profit from your data. You're trusting an organization whose whole mission is protecting it.
So the trust model is just fundamentally different.
Completely. And the technical side is pretty elegant. It uses something called bitmask technology.
Okay.
It's open source. And the certificate you need is already bundled in the OS. So all of that complex setup just boils down to you tapping a single button that says turn on.
So you get instant anonymous privacy just by default. But what happens if that one service, that primary Calyx VPN node, is slow? Or maybe it gets blocked where you are?
That's where redundancy comes in. CalyxOS also bundles in RiseUp.
Who are, legendary. They provide secure tools for journalists and activists.
Exactly. So if that main Calyx node has a problem, RiseUp is there as a community-funded, reliable backup. It's often packaged as an app called Bird. It's really a key part of the operational security here.
And speaking of OPSEC, this brings us to preventing data leaks. CalyxOS really encourages you to use the built-in Android feature Always On VPN.
Yes. And that is the essential configuration. It's the kill switch.
The kill switch, right.
So this setting basically tells your phone, if the secure tunnel to Calyx or RiseUp fails for any reason, maybe you walk out of Wi-Fi range, just drop all internet traffic.
So if you're not connected securely, you're not connected at all? No accidental leaks?
Precisely. The source material had a story about a journalist who absolutely relied on this to prevent an IP leak in a pretty dangerous situation. It wasn't just a nice feature, it was critical.
That is persuasive. But, the source has also brought up a good counterpoint. Convenience is great, but dedicated, paid VPNs are often faster, especially ones using WireGuard.
Sure, and that's a fair trade-off to consider. CalyxOS supports those perfectly fine. You can install whatever you want.
So you're not locked in?
Not at all. But when you connect the dots, the real takeaway is the philosophical shift. Most systems treat a VPN as something you have to go out and get. It's an extra. CalyxOS just provides encryption by default. It makes it accessible to someone who's never even heard of a VPN before. It just works.
Which lowers the barrier to entry massively.
It really does. So just to quickly recap the three key takeaways from the sources. First, Calyx VPN requires no account, which addresses that core trust issue. Second, The bitmask tech means the setup is about as easy as it gets.
Just one tap.
And third, you have to enable that kill switch. It's the essential step to prevent IP leaks.
And that simplicity, I mean, that really is the core feature here. So that leaves us and you with a final thought to mull over. If novice users are suddenly encrypted by default, what are the broader implications? What happens when software shifts encryption from this advanced niche feature into a basic utility, just there for everyone, like water or electricity? Something to consider. Okay, so imagine this. You're in a really high-risk situation, maybe a protest, or you're crossing a border that's, let's say, sensitive. And you suddenly need your entire digital life to just vanish instantly. We're talking wiping data, hiding your location, all of it in seconds. That's the threat model we're diving into today.
Exactly. And our mission here is to look at the very specific tools that CalyxOS has built for that exact scenario. We're really analyzing what makes it activist ready.
Right.
And that boils down to two things: their panic button, which is called Ripple, and how they handle Tor anonymity with an app called Orbot.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with, the worst case scenario, this Ripple panic button. So it's basically a master switch for emergency data cleanup.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a single command. You trigger it fast, maybe with a gesture, maybe a hidden icon.
So what's happening under the hood when you do that,
Wow.
when that signal goes out?
Well, what's so interesting is that it's not really a hardwired kill switch. It's more of a decentralized emergency broadcast. Ripple just sends out a panic signal across the whole OS.
A broadcast.
Yeah, and then designated panic responder apps, they just react. And this is the key part. It can tell F-Droid, the App Store, to just hide itself.
So the icon just disappears?
The icon's gone. Or you can tell a normal-looking calculator app to wipe all its secret data.
And it can go even further, right? I read it can go nuclear, a full factory reset.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the last resort. It can command the OS to reboot immediately or initiate a complete factory reset. It's all about plausible deniability.
I see, but wait a minute. If it triggers a full factory reset, isn't that just as suspicious as handing over a locked phone? If someone checks the audit logs later...
That's the critical calculation, isn't it? The reset is to stop immediate data extraction on the scene. It's a defense against, forensic tools they might have right there with them, not so much a way to bypass a later audit. Got it. Okay, so Ripple is the last-ditch defense for the data on the phone. What about hiding your tracks altogether? Evasion. That brings us to Tor.
Right, and this is where CalyxOS uses Orbot, which is the Tor proxy.
And how is this different? A lot of secure systems use Tor.
True, but they usually limit it to just the Tor browser. CalyxOS leverages Orbot for what we call system-wide Tor routing.
System-wide, so you mean everything, not just my web browser.
Everything, every app, every background service, all of it gets wrapped in those encrypted Tor layers.
That's a huge difference. Give me a practical example. I mean, why would I want to route my normal Twitter app through Tor?
Well, think about censorship. If you're in a country that blocks Twitter at a national level, routing the app through Orbot lets you bypass that firewall and communicate anonymously.
Okay.
Plus, the default browser in Calyx is already set up to handle those special onion addresses as long as Orbot is running.
But there has to be a trade-off. We all know Tor is. Well, it's slow. If you're routing everything system-wide, doesn't that make the whole phone just frustratingly sluggish? It does. And that's the necessary price for that level of anonymity. Your data is bouncing between at least 3 random servers around the world. It's complex by design.
So you have to make a choice.
You, the user, have to make a strategic choice. A VPN gives you speed and privacy, which is great for most things. Tor, through Orbot, gives you pure anonymity and censorship resistance. You have to know which tool you need for the threat you're facing right now.
So the bottom line is, Ripple is the emergency broadcast trigger for when things go wrong.
Right. The data destruction button.
And Orbot is for system-wide anonymity to avoid getting caught in the first place. These two features really are what makes CalyxOS activist ready.
They are. But here's the final thought to really chew on. If your entire defense relies on that panic broadcast working perfectly, what happens if the operating system itself is already compromised before you get a chance to even hit that switch?
Oof.
That's the context we have to keep in mind, especially when we start putting CalyxOS head-to-head with some of the other options out there. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to get right into the weeds, moving past all the marketing claims and looking at the raw engineering that separates mobile operating systems.
Exactly. Specifically, CalyxOS versus GrapheneOS.
And our mission today is to really define what the functional security gap is between them.
Right. And when you strip everything else away, the serious engineering criticisms of CalyxOS really boil down to just two things: their memory allocator choice and their update latency.
And what's really crucial for you to get here is that this whole thing revolves around a single core dilemma.
A trade-off.
It's a trade-off. Every custom OS has to decide how much security hardening they're willing to force on the system before it, inevitably starts to break apps and compromise usability.
It's a classic engineering problem.
Okay, so let's unpack that first piece then, the memory allocator. This is like where a ton of the low-level exploit resistance lives.
It is. GrapheneOS is famous for using something called hardened malloc.
And what does that actually do?
Well, think of it as a hyper-strict bouncer for your phone's memory. It is constantly checking everything, and it's super aggressive at preventing the kind of memory corruption exploits attackers love.
Okay, so what does CalyxOS do differently?
Well, this is what's so interesting. CalyxOS defaults to Scudo, which is the standard, perfectly good Android memory allocator, but it's definitely not as draconian as hardened malloc.
So why would they deliberately choose the less aggressive bouncer? There has to be a reason.
App compatibility. Hardened malloc is so effective that it actually punishes poorly written apps. If an app gets even a little bit sloppy with its memory management,
It just crashes it.
it crashes it immediately. CalyxOS has made a very clear choice to prioritize a smooth user experience where your apps just work.
So the bottom line here is a zero-day exploit targeting memory. It might just completely fail on GrapheneOS, but that same exploit could potentially succeed on CalyxOS.
That's the risk they've decided to accept.
Well-
And if the allocator is the internal defense, then the update process that manages the external risk.
And this is the part I find absolutely astonishing, the time difference. People in security circles call this the Tuesday problem, right?
Yeah, that's it. Google pushes its big security patches for Android on, the first Monday or Tuesday of the month.
And the response times are just worlds apart.
Completely. GrapheneOS usually has their update out within hours. They follow that stable AOSP branch religiously. CalyxOS, on the other hand, often takes days, sometimes even weeks to get that same patch out.
But hold on, couldn't you argue that delay is actually a good thing? I mean, they're doing extensive testing, right? Making sure the update doesn't break things for the average user.
You could, but it brings up a critical point about how attacks work. Those days or weeks create a massive window of vulnerability.
Because the bug is now public.
Exactly. As soon as Google releases the patch, the vulnerability is out in the open. Any attacker can reverse engineer the fix to understand the flaw. And during that gap, your phone is exposed to what we call an end-day exploit.
A known bug that is just sitting there, unpatched, on your device.
Right. And this whole philosophy, it extends down to the kernel, too. GrapheneOS recompiles its kernel with really aggressive options. They strip out debugging symbols. They strictly enforce IOMMU.
Whoa, wait, for the listener who hasn't deep dived into hardware security, what is IOMU enforcement? What does that actually stop?
Think of it like a barrier. It stops hardware peripherals, like a Wi-Fi chip, from accessing parts of memory they have no business touching. GrapheneOS turns that enforcement up to 11.
Which is a strong defense against hardware-level attacks.
A very strong defense. CalyxOS tends to stick closer to a standard kernel, so it just carries a bit more vulnerability surface there.
So to summarize all this, we have to be clear. CalyxOS is still light years more secure than the stock software on, say, a normal Samsung or Motorola phone.
Oh, absolutely. No question.
But when you compare it head-to-head with the engineering choices in GrapheneOS, it has a softer underbelly.
The sources had a great analogy for this. They said CalyxOS is an embassy. It's safe, it's professional, it's functional,
Yeah.
but it is not a fortress. A fortress is meant to be impenetrable.
So what's the central lesson we pulled from all this for you? I think it's that every single security choice is about prioritizing one defense over another. There's no perfect OS. There are only carefully weighed trade-offs.
And that really leaves you with a final provocative thought. Given these specific engineering decisions, how much is your individual convenience that guarantee that all your apps will just work truly worth when you weigh it against the risk of an exploit succeeding in those days or weeks before a known patch finally gets to your device?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping straight into a pretty intense mobile security battleground.
The one between GrapheneOS and CalyxOS.
Exactly. And we're going to focus on one single technical choice that really creates this huge philosophical rift between them.
It's a feature they call privileged extensions.
Right. So what's our mission here today?
Our mission is to really get why CalyxOS uses this feature, mostly for things like microG, and on the flip side, why GrapheneOS looks at it and basically says it's a fundamental security flaw.
So what is a privileged extension in, like, simple terms?
Think of it as giving certain apps the system's master keys. It's a modification that lets them get around all the normal security checks Android is supposed to enforce.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The first piece of this puzzle is something called signature spoofing. What is that, and why is GrapheneOS so completely against it?
Signature spoofing is, well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It lets one app pretend to have the digital identity, the signature of a totally different app.
Like pretending to be Google Play services.
Exactly. And GrapheneOS sees this as a huge violation because app isolation is, the absolute bedrock of Android security.
It breaks the chain of trust.
Completely. The OS can no longer guarantee an app is what it says it is. That whole contract with the user is just broken.
So if it's that bad, why would CalyxOS build their system around it? What's the trade-off?
It all comes down to convenience. It's a classic security versus convenience problem.
They want the phone to be usable out of the box.
Right. They restrict that spoofing permission only to their own signed system apps, like the ones needed for microG to work. So for them, the benefit of you having working apps outweighs what they see as a more theoretical risk.
But giving an app that kind of power expands something else, right? This trusted computing base, or TCB.
Yes, and this is where the risk starts to feel a lot less theoretical. The TCB is basically all the software and hardware you have to trust to keep your system secure.
And every time you bundle a system-level app,
you're making that TCB bigger. And CalyxOS bundles microG, F-Droid, the Aurora Store. You're handing out more of those master keys.
and more code just means more potential for bugs, more vulnerabilities.
Exactly. So the danger is, if an app like F-Droid gets a vulnerability, its silent install privilege could be hijacked.
And a hacker could install malware without you ever seeing a permissions pop up.
Silently. At the system level, that's the risk.
So what's the GrapheneOS alternative then? How do they handle it?
It's a fascinating contrast. GrapheneOS is all about containment. They bundle almost nothing.
Keeping that TCB as tiny as possible.
As tiny as humanly possible. And they insist that if you want something like Google Play, you install it as a normal user app. It's sandboxed.
So it's firewalled off from the rest of the system.
It's like putting it in a little prison cell. If that app fails or gets compromised, it fails inside its cell. It can't escape and take over the whole operating system fortress.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this actually mean for you, the listener?
The divide is pretty clear.
Yeah, on one side you have CalyxOS, which makes let's call it a subtle security compromise.
With signature spoofing and a bigger TCB.
Right, but you get a smooth, automated experience in return. Silent updates, things just work.
Then you have GrapheneOS, which maintains maximum security. The TCB is tiny, but you lose that convenience. You have to manually approve every single app update.
It's that tension between convenience and the trust you have to place in these privileged extensions.
Exactly.
So before we sign off, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
If an app store's ability to give you silent updates requires a privileged extension, something that's basically a backdoor giving it near system control, where do you personally draw the line between useful automation and, well, an unacceptable risk?
Okay, so for today's deep dive, we're getting into this stack of sources you sent over, all focused on the nuts and bolts of digital privacy.
Right. Specifically, backup engines.
Exactly. The open source tool Seed Vault and the organization that's really behind it, the Calyx Institute.
And our mission here, I think, is to unpack how this thing actually works.
Yes, how it works, but also where the limits are. You know, what are the real-world trade-offs when you build on top of an existing OS?
To really get that, you have to start with the origin story. It's pivotal.
Why do they even build it?
Well, think about it. If you want to truly de-Google your phone, you immediately hit a wall.
The backup system.
The backup system.
Yeah.
Google's is proprietary. From a privacy angle, it's a non-starter. So Calyx saw this and realized, they couldn't just wait for a solution.
They had to step up themselves.
They had to fund it, develop it, and build an open source tool from scratch. And that project became Seed Vault.
And what really surprised me in the source material was the ripple effect of that decision.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just some internal tool they built for CalyxOS.
Sure.
It was so well made that competitors...
GrapheneOS, LineageOS.
Yeah, exactly. They all adopted it as their standard. It shows Calyx isn't just, a consumer of privacy tech. They're a creator of it.
And that standardization is huge for the whole community. It creates a baseline.
A shared piece of infrastructure.
Right. So you can switch between these different ROMs and not have to learn a whole new system. It raises the bar for everyone.
Okay, so let's dig into how it actually works on its home turf on CalyxOS. They've made the user experience pretty smooth.
Very smooth.
For instance, you don't even need the cloud. You can use USB OTG storage.
Which just means plugging a thumb drive right into your phone.
Right. An encrypted local copy. Super secure.
And if you do want a cloud option, they've really streamlined connecting to a Nextcloud instance.
For anyone who doesn't know, Nextcloud is basically your own private self-hosted cloud.
So you get that remote storage convenience, but the data never leaves your control.
It sounds great on the surface, but we have to look under the hood at the reality of Android's limitations.
Mm-hmm. The reality check.
Even though Calyx developed it, Seed Vault on CalyxOS runs into the same walls it does everywhere else.
It does. And the first big one is just a developer flag.
The allow backup false flag.
Exactly. If an app developer sets that flag for whatever reason, security, data size, Seed Vault has to skip it, the developer gets the final say.
And then there's the one that really affects the day-to-day experience, the logout issue.
Ah, yes. This is the big one. So Seed Vault is great at grabbing the app itself, the APK file, and your data.
But not the credentials.
It struggles with the credentials because it can't properly back up the key store keys.
So the key store is like a digital key ring for your most secure apps.
That's a great way to put it. Think banking apps, encrypted messengers. Seed Vault saves the house and the furniture, but not the key to the front door.
So when you restore your phone, the apps are there, but you're logged out of everything.
Everything. You have to go through and manually sign back into all of them.
And when you compare that to a proprietary system like
iCloud backup, it's night and day. With iCloud, it's seamless. It just works. That lack of seamlessness is a real pain point for Seed Vault users.
So what's the big takeaway here? I mean, these limitations seem sort of unfixable without Google's help, right?
Pretty much. But the fact that Seed Vault exists at all is the real story. It proves Calyx's commitment goes way beyond just their own OS.
They're building foundational tools.
Foundational tools. Their VPN, their microG support, and Seed Vault. They are actively raising the privacy and security baseline for the entire community. They're true stewards of the ecosystem.
So to sum it all up, Calyx created Seed Vault. It became this cross-ROM standard, which is huge. But these core Android API and token issues, they persist. The perfect seamless restore just isn't there.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider. If that ideal, that perfect seamless backup you get from proprietary systems is technically impossible, even for the original developers, does your priority shift?
How so?
Does it shift from judging an OS on its perfect functionality to maybe judging it on its contribution to the entire privacy ecosystem? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cutting straight to the infrastructure that really dictates your digital sovereignty. Seed Vault. It's this open source backup system, and it's the tool that decides if leaving Google is a painful migration or a real solution.
And that's such a critical piece, because when people try to actually de-Google, they hit this massive roadblock.
Right.
Google Backup is proprietary. You just can't touch it. So you have this gaping hole, a huge security and privacy vulnerability for the whole custom ROM space.
And here's where the origin story gets really interesting, and I think a lot of people miss this.
Yeah.
The Calyx Institute didn't just find Seed Vault and adopt it. They developed and funded it from the ground up.
You built it. They were building foundational infrastructure, not just an operating system.
Exactly. A rising tide to lift Graphenius, LineageOS, everyone who wants control.
Which is fascinating, because Seed Vault became the cross-ROM standard for a reason.
Right.
It solved a huge problem by managing Android's own backup manager framework. It handles app data, permissions, not just files.
So if they're the architects, how did they optimize the blueprint on their home turf? Why is Seed Vault supposed to be most effective on CalyxOS?
Well, for one, it's the default system there, obviously.
Yeah.
And they offer robust USB OTG support, backing up to an external drive. That's pretty much table stakes for these ROMs now.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the really strategic move. CalyxOS makes it frictionlessly easy to link Seed Vault directly to an xCloud instance.
And that's a huge time saver. Think about the developer time that saves the average user who is already, running their own cloud setup.
It solidifies their whole reputation. It shows a culture of contribution, not just building for themselves. You see it with their VPN, with microG support, and with this. But we have to be honest here. perfect open source restoration. It's a bit of a myth in the Android world. And that brings us to the reliability reality.
Okay, let's unpack that. If Calyx built the system, why couldn't they just implement some kind of workaround? A hard-coded exemption for key apps within their own OS?
Because the limitations are baked deep into the cake. It's not a seed vault problem, it's an Android problem.
So even the original developers can't fix it?
Exactly. The first pain point is API restrictions. Apps can use a flag, allow backup false.
And if they use it, that's it.
That's it. It's instantly skipped. You just can't force them. It's a developer choice that overrides the entire system.
Which is understandable, but
Sure.
frustrating. Okay, so what about the other major issue, losing all your logged-in sessions?
That's the key store keys. The sources call it persistent token issues.
Right.
See, Seed Vault restores the app, the raw data, but it often fails to grab that unique digital handshake that proves your phone is the one that logged in.
So you're not restoring a live session?
Not at all. You're restoring an inert app that needs a full re-login, especially painful for banking apps or secure messengers. The privacy gain comes at the cost of that day one convenience.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening who's actually trying to achieve true data ownership?
It means you have to manage expectations.
Yeah. Understanding these built-in Android limits, it stops you from expecting this perfect iCloud-like clone and then getting disappointed. It gives you a much clearer picture of what's actually possible.
The core takeaway is this. Seed Vault's existence is a massive win. The fact Calyx built it for everyone is proof of their commitment to open, private infrastructure.
Yeah.
They solved the infrastructure problem.
But the perfect restoration problem, that remains an Android platform limitation.
Exactly. It's not a flaw in Seed Vault itself.
Okay. So we've seen the technical merits, we've seen the hard limits of Seed Vault. Now the bigger question for you is knowing when and how to apply this knowledge. We know what Calyx built, but knowing that perfect backup is impossible, what factors will determine whether you should recommend CalyxOS to a new user or insist on GrapheneOS for maximum security?
That's a delicate trade-off.
It is, and it requires a real decision framework, a kind of user profile matrix, and that's the next level of knowledge you really need to explore.